Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show, Johnny Delirious joins us by webcam to talk about his experience with extraterrestrial beings, also known as alien abduction. Johnny Delirious, welcome back to Windows on the World. We're having a really interesting chat here about alien abduction, off-planetary influence, and really the control of the human race from quite an interesting angle. Now, this experience you had, this abduction experience, this interdimensional experience you had with these entities and grey aliens, it's quite different from any other story I've heard. It does have a fairly comedic aspect because of the drug nature of it, which brings another angle to it. But in my opinion, that doesn't really denigrate it in any way, because as we know, these are all different states of consciousness, and it's your ability to be able to bring back that state of consciousness, which we've been talking about, and bringing back that memory. And it's the memory of these things that people often get mixed up with. For instance, the out-of-body experience, which I've studied and I've been very much looking into for years and had many out-of-body experiences. It is a very interesting analogy with this, because the beginnings of the out-of-body experience, you start to get sleep paralysis, which is actually very relaxing after a while. It means your body goes completely numb. You can't feel anything. It's like a catalepsy, but with body asleep, mind awake. And this is where you can start to induce these vibrations, or even have them happen naturally, which cause the body to become loose from the soma, or the soul or mental state, whatever you want to interpret that as, or directed consciousness, the consciousness leaving the body. Now, we were talking about this, and the difference between this sleep paralysis, which could be the beginning of an out-of-body experience if people let themselves go through it, which they usually don't. They usually wake up and with fear and, oh God, I can't move. But people seem to get this associated with alien abduction. Can you just give us your view on that?
Well, yes. I mean, one of the differences, one, I did have a physical experience on the ship, on the mothership, because I've got an implant. It's still there. Anyway, they were actually able to tap into my mind, and then I could find the reversal and tap into their mind, what I call the group mind, or alien group mind. And then, as I said earlier in the show, I could differentiate between their group mind and my mind. And then I could differentiate, because I was doing cocaine, how that influenced my mind and what I would see in the group mind. And then I could differentiate between where our true source is coming from. You know, some people call it the Godhead, the universal mind, whatever it is. So, I had 3 or 4 or 5 different aspects. To me, it was like I said, channels on a television set. And I was able to do that because when I went into the mind melt, I found out why I was there. Now, a lot of people, when they get abducted by grays, for example, they talk about, getting impregnated, or babies stolen, or fluids taken, or being probed. And it's very humiliating, to say the least. And when I say, oh, no, none of that happened to me, the grays were friendlier to me than the the Americans in the combat uniform. And they go, oh, God, Johnny, quit talking to me. Oh, God. So I really, I don't please the UFO people community very much because mine's so different. And the reason that they abducted me is because I was doing so much cocaine. I was running a laboratory doing cocaine. What I didn't realize running the laboratory, I tried coffee, I couldn't stay awake enough. I didn't realize that my non-A, non-B hepatitis diagnosis was hepatitis C, and it was bad. If I didn't have a Coke mark, I couldn't run the lab. When, that's the way it was. So that kept me awake because coffee burnt my stomach to the point I had ulcers. But the lab was an exciting business to me. So, cocaine's habit forming. So I do it and do my lab. And boy, that one night I got abducted.
Johnny, I just want to bring something in here because it's something I wanted to bring up earlier on. When people get invaded or they can get taken over or abducted or be invaded by these interdimensional entities, often the people have a mental disturbance, or it can often happen with artificial stimulants like drugs because they seem to open up this gateway. Now, usually I would say that's a really bad thing because it's what you're doing is you're opening yourself up to entities when you take these substances, But your kind of experience of it is slightly different. And I think that's because of what you were explaining in the fact that you could see all the different levels of it. Whereas when people get possessed, I mean, it is a very interesting analysis.
It's just one channel.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yes.
They can't see anything but that. They're under control.
Yes, absolutely. So that's why I find what you're saying quite credible, because it ties in with my research.
Oh, okay.
Yes, definitely.
Well, see, the reason they had me is, and I find out in the mind melt, because that was one of the, because one of the questions I asked, I said, wow, you must be a young kid. He said, and I got back, yeah, I'm just starting school. And they put me in charge of watching you. So a lot of times I'd probe a question in my mind, and boom, I'd get an answer. But all of a sudden I found it in the group mind. And so all of a sudden when I arrived in the group mind, I said, okay, why am I here? Why do you want me? And you're letting me do coke. I mean, what's going on? So all of a sudden I got an answer back. They said, because okay, I was a 309, Mark. Okay, that's one of the things that the American soldier said to me. He said, yeah, because the one guy said, well, I see the guy over there, and we got those, but who's the floater? And we're in the little remote recon ship. He said, who's the floater? He said, oh, that's a 309. And I asked the question when I was with the little alien. I said, he called me a 309. What's a 309? And what I found out is 3 was the number of drugs, 3 or less that you were on. 0 meant the amount of times you've been arrested. And 9 were the amount of years or minimal amount of years. In other words, they had to have somebody that was less than 3 on 3 drugs. They had to, study somebody that had 0 arrests. And they had to study somebody that had been doing at least 9 years. So for me, the quest was, from their standpoint, was to figure out how my mind worked, how I could run a laboratory doing cocaine all the time. And if they found out why, that's why they put the implant in my finger. If they found out why, then they could figure out how to run these ships with just their mind. Because that was the goal back then in 1989, was to figure out how to run the technology like the Greys did with just their mind. See, because there were no controls, but they were sitting at the helm, and they would just put their hands in these little holsters, and they would just run the ship from their mind. So they wanted our pilots to do that. Well, they got it today, but back in 1989, they didn't have it. But by tapping into my brain, they figured out how, that was one of the things that helped them, because, you don't get any sleep when you're doing cocaine all the time. And so they couldn't figure out how that could be. And so, okay, so that's one thing. And then the other thing was they had a way that they wanted to show or wanted to find how to control somebody's mind better if somebody's on drugs. Because the one thing I found out was about the beast, because when I asked about the secret space program, I saw these ominous little objects. Well, they weren't little, but in orbit or in synchronous orbit around the Earth, and they're like eggs. And I was like, wow, those are weird. They're different from the other satellites. And I saw this in the group mind, and those were the beasts. And it turns out that, it was a military term. It was an acronym. It stood for Battle Engagement Aerial Simulator and Tracker. And so the beasts, once they have people compliant enough, the beast could send signals to certain parts of the world or to a certain group or to a certain city, and then maybe they'll see the bat sign on the clouds, or maybe they all of a sudden start, being like robots or whatever they want to do. And that's what the beast is all about. And the final really nail on the coffin, so to speak, for the last foothold of our psyche for them to control is our free will. They haven't been able to get the free will except just with mass hypnosis. That's the only way that they can do right now. And so they're trying that in every way, chemically and, every way that possible. But the fact that there's interdimensional beings part of this effort too makes it extremely hard for the human race right now to comply, because they're, number one, trying to wipe out all religions so nobody can believe in a higher power. They're trying to make that seem like it's not in vogue anymore. And then if you're always on your iPhone, doing texting, then basically they got you. And so it's real funny how the major elite people, they don't when they send their kids to school, they're not on iPads and iPhones and computer technology. It's basically the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic, because they want those minds to be, the lizards want their minds to be free and controlled by simply them,
That's right. They want to re-engineer the masses, which takes us into transhumanism as well.
So they're elite. Yeah. They have to be separate from the masses. So there's one control for the masses, then there's another control for the elite, that the lizards have a particular program that they're doing, which they keep, the royal families and all that under a certain guise that, there's this horrible race that we're scared of that's coming after us. So you got to follow and play by the rules and whatever it is, do all these awful things that we want you to do. And, I think of people like Benjamin Netanyahu and some of these other ones. They're like these, gargantuan Godzilla, war, and all they're supposed to do is have more and more blood being shed, because
that's in my opinion, those people are definitely being used by interdimensional entities. They are just basically hollowed out shells who are following orders,
and that keeps people so compliant, because if they're constantly distracted by misery and, or just simply being interrupted, their daily the last thing they want is for you to have a consistent routine.
Well, that's
No way.
exactly what trauma-based mind control is all about, and it's a very subtle thing. It's not just being tortured. I mean, we're being slowly tortured with the EMF frequencies. We go into a lot of this on the show. The whole of this system and the Agenda 21 with when the cell towers, the EMF radiation, the chemtrails, it's all there for a very good reason, and they do seem to be re-engineering us to make us super compliant, and that does seem to be working to a certain extent, but not with all of us, which is great. So in summing up, Johnny, we didn't get onto this, but could you just clarify what you think about that difference between sleep paralysis and the out-of-body experience and the alien abduction? So many people who suffer this sleep paralysis think they're being abducted by aliens. Can you give us your view on that?
Well, most of them are probably being influenced by interdimensional beings, where it's not necessarily physical. Some of them are being abducted and they don't remember it, but they just think it's a bad dream, for example. And so there's two sides to the paralysis. One is they're having interdimensional beings influence them, possessing them, so to speak, is a good way of putting it. And there's several different entities that do that, whether it's the draconian lizards, whether it's these other lower astral beings that, you know, feed on somebody that has a habit like drinking or like cocaine, for example. And somebody said, well, how do you know you weren't possessed by a being? I said, well, after the abduction, I'm sure I was being possessed by many beings, because all I could do was cocaine, because the abduction was so profound. But there are some that have sleep paralysis and their body's actually taken. And, they have technology that can change our state and pull us into a more of a interdimensional state, even our physical body. And so there's a spectrum of different experiences that many of those people have. None of them may be the same, but there are parallels on certain ones that are consistent. And but the biggest issue is that most of the people have a problem sorting that out.
Yes, that's a very good point, Johnny, because I think it comes down to know thyself, what we were talking about in the beginning, really. It's that having that awareness that when I've gone into sleep paralysis, and I know it's happening, it's consciously me. I feel it's my consciousness. I'm not being invaded by anything. Therefore, when the out-of-body experience happens and the vibrational state kicks in, I know it's me that's leaving my own body. However, I have had experiences where I have been helped as well. We could go into this all night, and I'm sure we will on a future show, because it's something I can talk about and you can talk about for hours. But I'd just like to thank you very much for being on Windows on the World, Johnny Delirious, and we'll speak to you very soon.
All right. Thank you, Mark.